3 seconds. No words, no anger, no explanation. Just a hand that stayed at its side while the most powerful person on the planet waited for it to move. And in that single frozen moment, something shifted in global diplomacy that no speech, no summit declaration, no trade document had managed to shift in 2 full years. If you want to understand what actually happened, why it happened, and what it reveals about power, respect, and the language the body speaks when words have run out, stay with me, because this goes much deeper than a snub. Mark Carney walked into the G20 bilateral greeting sequence knowing exactly what he was going to do. The setup is fixed at every G20. 2 leaders approach, shake hands, hold for the photo, exchange a few words, and move on. 15 to 20 seconds per pair. The same ritual performed identically by every leader with every other leader since the group was formed. It exists to signal one thing publicly and visually. We recognize each other as equals. We deal with each other with mutual regard. Carney broke that ritual not with a walkout, not with a statement, not with a press release, but by doing absolutely nothing. And nothing, it turned out, was the loudest thing he could have done. Trump came forward the way the world has watched him do hundreds of times. Slight forward lean, right hand fully extended, the grip and pull motion that body language analysts have cataloged across decades of bilateral meetings. Carney was already positioned facing him, body square, posture upright. And his hands, this is the detail that stopped every camera in the room. His hands were not in his pockets. They were not folded behind him. They were not holding anything that might explain the lack of response. They rested visibly at his sides, open, visible, unmoving. The placement was not accidental. It was a message written in stillness, and every leader, every camera operator, every diplomat in that room received it in real time without a single syllable being spoken. Subscribe now because this story is still developing and we are updating our analysis daily. The 4 seconds that followed have since been broken down frame by body language specialists around the world. In the first second, Trump's hand reached full extension while Carney's eyes moved from Trump's face down to the hand, then back up to his face. One analyst described it as the visual equivalent of reading a sentence and choosing not to answer. In the second second, something shifted in Trump's expression. The confident expectation of a greeting dissolving into the flicker of a man realizing the expected response was not coming. In the third second, Carney gave one slight nod. So subtle it was invisible to anyone beyond a few meters away. But the tight shots caught it clean. It said, "I see you. I see your hand. I am choosing not to take it." And this is deliberate. Trump's hand stayed extended for 1 more second before it came back. The pullback was not smooth. It was the motion of something that had been turned away. And every camera in the room recorded it. Now here is what most coverage missed entirely. This moment did not happen in a burst of emotion. It was planned, debated, almost abandoned, and ultimately chosen with complete awareness of what it would trigger. 48 hours before the summit, Trump's administration had issued a public statement declaring that Canada's push to diversify its trade relationships amounted to economic betrayal of the United States, and that any allied nation reducing its reliance on American trade would face consequences. 2 years of tariffs, sovereignty challenges, personal attacks on Carney's credibility, an abruptly ended phone call, economic pressure campaigns, and now this. The assertion that Canada did not even have the right to decide who it traded with. 12 hours before the summit, Carney gathered 6 people in a secured room inside the Canadian delegation's hotel. Phones banned. No notes kept. The conversation was genuine, heated, and split straight down the middle. His foreign policy team pushed back hard. Refusing the handshake would breach diplomatic protocol at a scale that had no modern precedent. It would dominate the entire summit narrative. Some would read it as petty rather than principled. 3 alternative approaches were presented, each designed to signal displeasure while remaining within the boundary of diplomatic convention. His political strategists took the opposite position. 2 years of carefully worded responses had been absorbed by the White House without producing a single change in behavior. Every address, every countermeasure, every diplomatic signal had registered as background noise. Language had exhausted itself. The only remaining tool was physical. One advisor said something that the room later identified as the sentence that ended the debate. If you take his hand, you are telling every camera in that room that everything he has done over 2 years falls within the acceptable limits of conduct between partners. Your hand is the last instrument you have left to say otherwise without speaking a word. Carney listened to both sides. Then he asked one question. Can I genuinely shake this man's hand? The room went quiet. The answer was already in the silence. What happened next revealed something even more significant than the refusal itself. Every other leader at the G20 had to make an instant, unscripted choice about where they stood. And they made it not in press conferences, but in real time with every camera on Earth pointed at them. France moved first. Within 3 minutes, the French president crossed the room, extended his hand to Carney, and held the shake for 4 seconds, twice the diplomatic standard, with his left hand resting on Carney's forearm in a gesture body language experts immediately identified as deliberate and staged for the lenses. Germany's chancellor went through standard protocol with Trump, then spent nearly 8 minutes in an unscheduled bilateral with Carney, 4 times the normal length, conducted openly in full view of the press group. The extended conversation altered the physical geography of the summit room. The United Kingdom handled it with diplomatic precision, equal greetings for both men, but a private exchange with Carney that ran longer than any other bilateral the Prime Minister held that morning. Japan walked alongside Carney between sessions, a frame read across Asia as an alignment signal. Australia shook Trump's hand, but quietly dropped the traditional joint photograph, a deviation spotted immediately by diplomatic correspondents covering the event. India maintained equal correctness toward both men, but observers noted a measurable warmth in the Prime Minister's body language toward Carney that carried its own clear message. And here is what crystallizes everything. Not one of the 38 other heads of state publicly criticized Carney's refusal. Not one stepped in to smooth it over. Not one called it out of line. The collective silence of the rest of the G20 was not neutrality. It was a verdict, delivered in exactly the same wordless language Carney had used. For 90 minutes after the refusal, Carney said nothing publicly. No briefing, no post, no statement. He let the image stand on its own because he understood something fundamental about communication. Language would have given analysts something to argue about. The photograph needed no argument. It was already doing its work in every language on Earth simultaneously. Then he walked into a side room, no stage, no podium, standing alone, hands empty, in front of a small group of journalists. He addressed the refusal directly. I did not shake the president's hand today. No hedging, no softening, no diplomatic phrasing. And then 11 words that transformed a physical act into a principle. My hand is not available to people who don't respect what it represents. He added nothing, took no questions, left the room. 15 seconds total, 3 of action, 15 of words. The most concise and consequential diplomatic exchange in the history of G20 summits. Those 11 words were not chosen at random. Each one carries load. My hand grounds the statement in the body, in the exact gesture the world had just witnessed. Is not available sounds harder than I refused. It frames the handshake not as an emotional reaction, but as a condition, a state, something removed from circulation the way an asset is taken off the market. To people who don't respect names, the standard clearly. This is not about tariff percentages or trade mechanics. It is about respect. What it represents elevates the hand from a personal gesture to a national symbol. The hand is Canada. Canada's hand is not available. Not to this, not under these conditions, not until something changes. And that something is not a policy adjustment. It is respect itself. Warren Buffett's response cut through all of it with the clarity that 70 years of reading people in high-stakes negotiations produces. He said this 3-second action told him more about the real state of American power than 2 full years of economic data combined. Then he said the thing he has operated by his entire career. Dismiss what people claim. Observe what they perform. Words are managed. Words are prepared, reviewed, cleared, shaped to produce a desired image. But the body tells the truth. In 7 decades of commerce, he noted, every deal that later failed had sent him a physical signal before it failed, a hesitation before signing, a glance at a colleague at the wrong moment, arms crossed when they should have been open. The unscripted signals, the ones released without conscious direction, always told the real story. He looked at the photograph and said what the room at the G20 had already felt. Carney's body communicated in 3 seconds what 2 years of statements had failed to communicate. And the world trusted the body over the statements because it always does. The photograph is no longer just a news image. It is the icon of this period of US and Canada relations. In 50 years, nobody will recall the specific tariff rates. Nobody will remember the particular economic forecasts or the quarterly trade figures or the summit communiques. They will remember the photograph, the outstretched hand, the hands that stayed still, 18 inches of space that said more than 2 years of diplomacy. Because the photograph is not really about trade. It is about whether two neighboring democracies sharing the longest peaceful border in human history still regard each other as partners deserving of the most basic gesture of human recognition. And the answer, frozen in a single frame, visible to every person on Earth without translation or explanation, was no. As Buffett put it in one line, he reached out his hand and found out what 2 years of pressure had actually cost him: the willingness of another leader to meet it. Now, here is what the other major players at this summit are doing in response. What the White House's internal reaction revealed about how this moment landed behind closed doors, and what diplomatic historians are now saying this refusal changes permanently about the rules of allied engagement. This is unfolding daily, and the implications are widening. We track it every day so you do not have to. If this gave you something the mainstream coverage did not, subscribe. No pressure. Just real analysis, updated daily, for people who want to understand what is actually happening beneath the headlines.